Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of an evil book and the incident that happened to a boy named Alex who found it. Sit tight and listen to the full story. Let's begin. A few years ago, a boy named Alex, who was a university student living a mediocre life in the small town of Barstow, United States. Alex had never been one to believe in superstition. He was a practical, down-to-earth guy, and the idea of magic or the supernatural was something he laughed off as ridiculous. So, when he found an old book in the dusty apartment he had just rented, he thought nothing of it at first. It was simply a relic of the past, discarded and forgotten. But the story of what happened after is one of terror, madness, and regret. A story that would change Alex's life forever. The apartment was cheap, unusually cheap. It had been empty for years, the landlord said, and no one seemed to want it despite its prime location near the university. Alex had just started his first year of college, and with rent prices soaring, he didn't have the luxury of being picky. The building was old and a little run down, but it was quiet and the rent was affordable, something he couldn't turn down. When he first moved in, the apartment felt strange. The air was heavy with dust, and the walls seemed to absorb the sunlight, leaving the place dim no matter how many windows were open. But Alex didn't mind. He figured it just needed some cleaning and a bit of time to feel like home. While unpacking his things, he noticed a large old bookshelf standing in one corner of the living room. Most of the shelves were empty, but there was one book, sitting alone and untouched. Its cover was thick and leather-bound, with strange symbols etched into it. Curious, Alex pulled it off the shelf and examined it. The book was heavier than it looked, and as he opened it, a cloud of dust puffed up into the air. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with ancient, cryptic text that he didn't recognize. But what caught his attention were the illustrations. Dark, twisted drawings of people in strange robes, performing rituals, and symbols that seemed to twist and writhe on the page. At first, he thought it was some sort of old religious text or a collector's item. He flipped through a few pages, chuckling to himself at the absurdity of it. Spells? Rituals? Cults? It was all nonsense, he thought. But as the days passed, he couldn't get the book out of his mind. There was something about it that drew him in. Late at night, when the apartment was silent and the world outside seemed far away, Alex found himself reaching for the book, flipping through its pages again and again. It was as though the book itself was calling to him, whispering promises of power and secrets long forgotten. One evening, he stumbled upon a spell. Simple, harmless, or so it seemed. It was a spell for influencing someone's affection. A love spell of sorts. Alex rolled his eyes. It was ridiculous. But then he thought of Sarah. She was a girl in one of his classes, someone he had admired from afar for months. She barely even knew he existed, but Alex had always harbored a crush on her. What harm could it do to try? It was just for fun, after all. The spell was simple enough. It required him to recite a few words each night before going to bed, and after a few days, the spell would take effect. Alex decided to give it a go. It was harmless, just some silly, ancient gibberish. For the next few nights, he dutifully repeated the incantation before falling asleep, feeling foolish the entire time. On the third night, things began to change. At first, it was subtle. Sarah would smile at him when they passed in the hall, or sit next to him in the library. Then, one day, she struck up a conversation with him out of the blue, asking about a class they shared. Alex was stunned. Was it just a coincidence, or had the spell actually worked? He wasn't sure, but he wasn't going to question it. He was thrilled that she was finally paying attention to him. As the days went by, Sarah's interest in him seemed to grow. They started spending more time together, grabbing coffee between classes, studying in the library. It was everything Alex had wanted. The spell, it seemed, had worked like a charm, but now that he had gotten a taste of the book's power, he found himself craving more. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet and the only sound was the faint hum of traffic outside, Alex would sit at his small, rickety table and pore over the book's pages. There were spells for all sorts of things: wealth, power, influence. One spell in particular caught his eye, a spell for unimaginable wealth. According to the book, it could make him a millionaire overnight, but it required a human sacrifice. The spell had to be performed on the night of a full moon, and the sacrifice had to be made within 24 hours of casting the spell. Alex recoiled at the thought. He wasn't a killer. He could never take someone's life, no matter what the reward. But as the days went by, the thought gnawed at him. The spell promised riches beyond his wildest dreams. No more student loans, no more scraping by on ramen and secondhand clothes. He could have everything he ever wanted. Still, the idea of taking a life made him sick. He closed the book and pushed it away, determined to forget about it. But the voices wouldn't leave him alone. Late at night, as he lay in bed, he would hear them. Whispers in the dark, urging him to go through with it. The voices grew louder with each passing day, and soon, they were all he could think about. One evening, under the pale light of the full moon, Alex made a decision. He would go to a bar, meet someone, and bring them back to his apartment. He didn't plan on actually going through with the sacrifice, not at first. He just wanted to see if he could. He told himself it was just a test, nothing more. At the bar, he met a girl named Rachel. She was pretty, friendly, and seemed genuinely interested in him. They talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories over drinks. Alex found himself liking her more than he had expected. But the voices in his head wouldn't stop. They whispered and hissed, urging him to take her back to his apartment to complete the ritual. He invited her back, his heart pounding in his chest as they walked through the empty streets. She didn't suspect a thing. When they arrived at his apartment, he led her to the living room, offering her a drink as he tried to calm his nerves. The book sat on the table, open to the page with the spell. The knife he had prepared for the sacrifice gleamed in the dim light. Rachel smiled at him, unaware of the darkness lurking in the room. Alex's hands trembled as he reached for the knife, but as he looked at her, something inside him snapped. He couldn't do it. He couldn't take an innocent life, no matter how loud the voices screamed in his head. He made an excuse and let her leave, watching as she disappeared down the hallway, unaware of how close she had come to death. Alex sat down at the table, his head in his hands, overwhelmed with guilt and fear. He had failed to complete the spell, and now he feared what the consequences would be. That night, as Alex lay in bed, the whispers grew louder. He tried to ignore them, but they filled his mind, drowning out all other thoughts. The air in the room grew cold, and a sense of dread washed over him. He opened his eyes, and standing at the foot of his bed was a figure. A dark, twisted figure that seemed to be made of shadow. The figure moved closer, its eyes glowing with a sickly, pale light. Alex tried to scream, but no sound came out. His body was frozen with fear as the figure reached out, its long, bony fingers brushing against his skin. The creature's touch was ice cold, and as it wrapped its hand around his throat, Alex felt his life being drained away. Blood began to pour from his throat, soaking the sheets as the creature tightened its grip. His vision blurred, and his body went limp as the life was sucked from him. The last thing Alex saw was the creature's face, twisted, burnt, and deformed, its mouth twisted into a wicked smile. By morning, Alex was found dead in his bed, his face contorted in terror. The book lay open on the table, its pages stained with blood. No one could explain what had happened, and the apartment remained empty once more. For weeks after Alex's death, rumors spread through the university about the apartment and the mysterious book. Some students claimed they had seen strange lights in the windows at night, while others swore they heard whispers coming from the apartment when they passed by, but no one dared to enter, and the book remained hidden inside waiting for its next victim. Several years later, a new tenant moved into the apartment. Like Alex, he was drawn to the cheap rent and the convenient location, unaware of the dark history that lingered within the walls. As he unpacked his belongings, he noticed the same old bookshelf in the corner, and on it, the same leather-bound book. Curiosity got the better of him, and he reached for the book, flipping through its pages. The cryptic text and twisted illustrations intrigued him, just as they had intrigued Alex. But unlike Alex, he didn't dismiss it as nonsense. He could feel the power within the pages, a dark, pulsing energy that seemed to call to him. Late at night, when the world outside was quiet, he would sit at the same rickety table, poring over the book's spells and rituals. The whispers returned, growing louder with each passing day, urging him to cast the spells to unlock the book's true power. One night, under the light of a full moon, the new tenant made a decision. He would perform the wealth spell, just as Alex had attempted before him. But this time, there would be no hesitation, no last-minute change of heart. He had already chosen his sacrifice. As he prepared for the ritual, the air in the apartment grew thick with darkness, and the whispers became deafening. The book seemed to glow with a sinister light, its pages vibrating with anticipation. The new tenant smiled to himself, confident that he would succeed where Alex had failed. But he didn't know what awaited him. The moment the ritual was complete, a figure appeared in the room. A dark, twisted figure with glowing eyes and a deformed, burnt face. It moved toward the new tenant, just as it had moved toward Alex. He tried to run, but the creature was too fast. Its long, bony fingers wrapped around his throat, and within minutes, he was dead. The book fell to the floor, its pages stained with blood. The whispers faded, and the apartment grew silent once more. The book, however, remained, waiting, watching, and calling out to its next victim. Like and subscribe to our channel for more horror stories.